Hi everybody, welcome. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? It's okay, you're okay? Yeah? Can you hear me in the back, Curtis? Okay, that's good. Even with the announcements off to the side, we still be all right. So, welcome to our seed saving workshop here in the seed room in Kenhteke. So fun. Most communities do not have a seed room. We're so fortunate. So, and we have a little mini seed cleaner here that I think we're doing demos of through the weekend, which is just a miniature version of what the building was built for. And Jennifer knows how to run it, so she's going to do that at some point. But so I'm going to mostly talk about tomatoes today because everybody loves tomatoes. Anybody here that doesn't love tomatoes? Yay! I love tomatoes. And they... yeah, in the ketchup bottle, yes. Well, we'll cover that. We'll talk about that. You can do that and save your seeds at the same time. So, and also because they take a little bit, they're a little bit finicky. There's a technique to saving the tomato seeds. Whereas most crops, you just basically let them dry on the plant. A lot of our common vegetable seeds are what we call dry seeds. And they literally you just need to let the plant grow flowers. The flowers will dry down, the petals will drop, and those flowers will turn into seeds. And if you just let them keep drying, keep doing their thing and drying out, you will get viable seeds. So that, anybody know what plant this is? Have you seen this before? Get rid of that one. No?
Lettuce?
No cheating, Janice. Janice is absolutely right. This is lettuce. So if you let lettuce, if you let one plant grow, it'll grow to about 4 feet maybe even more, and it'll flower, and beautiful flowers. I highly recommend them, even like ornamentally, beautiful yellow flowers. It'll just be covered. And then if you let them keep living, keeps going on, the yellow petals will drop off and this white fluff will form. And that's when you know the seeds are ready. So I don't think I can move very far here, but if, thanks Jennifer, I'm going to give everybody a head here, or you can take that whole thing and pass it around too. That would be great. So check out how many seeds come from just one head, one of those little fluffy bits.
Oh, wow. 6 minutes. 6 minutes.
So,
That's a lot of seeds.
exactly, right? That's from one plant. From one seed grows one plant, grows many, many, many lettuce seeds. And if you don't pick it, you can pick some leaves to eat, but you have to let at least one plant do its thing. Like just leave it in the garden and let it flower and do its thing. Yeah. So lettuce is a nice one to do this with because it is self-pollinating. So every lettuce flower has both male and female parts, and it can accept, the ovum can accept the pollen. So you will you'll get pretty good lettuce seed if you do that. Not all plants are like that. And of course we humans are definitely not like that. but lettuce is a good one. And because it's an annual plant, so it goes from seed to seed in just 1 year, that also makes it nice and easy. So in one season you get lots and lots of lettuce seed.
All varieties of lettuce?
All varieties of lettuce should do that. Now, so this is a good point because the seed that we buy typically for our gardens is not grown in Canada usually. So Normally, yes, lettuce should do that, but if it was grown in Israel or Mexico, it might not do it in our shorter season. But my experience with lettuce, that seed that you actually buy, is that it tends to bolt to seed faster. So it does tend to do that actually fairly quickly, which is not ideal either, right? If you want a full lettuce plant, you don't really want it to bolt right to seed. So this lettuce seed that we were just passing around is locally grown and locally adapted. So it goes, you plant one seed, you get a beautiful full head of lettuce, and then it flowers and sets seed, and it does that all in our season here because it's adapted to do that. So yeah, I can't guarantee that lettuce that you buy, it should be okay, but you don't want to you don't want to save seed from something that bolts straight to seed, and you don't want to have it going late or beyond the frost cycle so that it takes too long. Does that make sense? So a lot of our crops are like that. They're that sort of dry seed that you just need to leave the plant alone and let it do its thing. Beans are like that, for instance. You just leave some beans on the plant and let the whole plant dry down, and before a rain, maybe in the fall, but definitely before frost, you bring it inside and they'll be hard and dry basically. The same thing with peas, spinach, a lot of things like that, or you just let the plant do its thing, what it wants to. For lettuce, that's true. For beans, that's probably true. For most things, though, you do want some cross-pollination within the variety, just for genetic diversity, right? Diversity is our friend. So you can definitely try it with one plant, to begin with when you're first starting out. That's a good idea. But as you get curious and become more of a seed saver, you'll find you probably want more of a population, a larger population of the same variety. Yeah. So that's most of our seeds, many of our seeds. So why would we bother doing this actually? Why would we want to save our seeds? Anybody got ideas?
They'll control over what environment they were in, I guess.
Yes, that's right. That's a very good point. Yes, it's growing in our season, it's getting whatever rainwater we get, it's growing in our soil, which is different than other soils. Yeah, that's very good. And so every time something goes to seed, every time the plant flowers and the genes recombine, then there's some adaptation that happens, right? So that's another advantage with the annual crops, is that every time you grow it, every season, there's some genetic recombining that creates that adaptation to our own climate. Yeah. Any other reasons? That's a very good one. Cost? Yeah, there you go. Economics. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And they're not getting cheaper. Seeds are getting more expensive, and actually it's quite labor intensive. It can be labor intensive to save some seeds, so as labor costs go up, probably the price of seeds will go up as well. Certainly local seed companies tend to charge a bit more for their seeds because they're better quality and they've more labor has gone into them, right? More time has gone into growing them and saving them. So that makes sense, yeah.
To make sure a seed still is kept, right, I guess.
Yes.
In case, you might grow it, but a bunch of other people won't, so it's not economically viable for a seed company to put that seed out if
very good. That's right, absolutely. So something that happened back in the 70s, or even maybe before, and has kept happening, is that seed companies seem to be, there's a conglomeration of seed companies. So bigger seed companies are buying up smaller regional seed companies. And what happens when they do that is they drop a bunch of seed varieties, the ones that were adapted to that region, but they can't sell it anywhere else, where it's not popular or it's not this or that. So yeah, that seed then is lost, right? Those varieties that they've dropped are just not available anymore. So if we like them, we need to save them. So the origins of the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary seed collection, which is now being saved here at the Kenhteke Seed Sanctuary, was farmers near Napanee who saw that happening. And some of their favorite workhorse varieties, the ones that did really well for them every year and they relied on, were all of a sudden not available to purchase. They couldn't buy them anymore. So they, fortunately had some seed kept back, and they planted it out and figured out how to save its seed themselves so that they could still have it. So yeah, definitely very good reason to save seeds. Yeah. So there are lots more reasons to save seeds. I'm sure you'll come up with some as you're driving home today or whatever. Probably flavor, for one thing, is something that comes up because a lot of the varieties that we're buying for seed have been bred for mechanical harvesting or for shipping purposes. Like they're the ones that are being grown by the big farms to send to the grocery stores, basically. And we all know what gets lost in that process. Some of the flavor is often gone because you can only breed for so many characteristics. So they may well lose nutrient value as well. And certainly if the plant gets its nutrients from the soil, from whatever's happening in the soil. So again, if they're chemically fertilized, then they're probably not going to be as nutritious for us humans as what's growing in your garden, which may have some compost or some other good stuff, So yes, they're not being bred for nutrition, and so we can do that in our own gardens. We can, just by tasting and knowing what feels good to us to eat, we can save the seeds from it, and that will probably be more nutritious. Yeah, so tons of reasons to save our own seeds. Food security, right? This is a big one. People are talking about food security nowadays. There's lots of communities. Canada does not grow enough of its own seeds. This country we don't grow our own seeds. We import them from, like I said, Israel, China, Mexico, California. And 9 out of 10 bites of our food relies on seed, grows from a seed. Even if you're eating meat, dairy, those animals ate seeds and plants that grew from seeds. So we are very reliant on seeds as part of our food system, but we're not growing them enough. So we can make our communities more food secure by saving our own seeds. So even just a little bit helps. It's really great. So there you go, that's our intro. Now, so I'll say right off the top that I do have a handout here on saving tomato seeds. This is from Seeds of Diversity Canada, which is a really great not-for-profit. The photocopies didn't come through that well, but the ideas are all the same. It's all written in text there, so you should be able to get that. And maybe we'll have some video available to refresh your memory too at some point. So, what do we need to save tomato seeds? So as I said, tomatoes are a little bit more complicated than the dry seeds because the seeds are inside a fruit. They're inside here. They're not drying down on the outside of the plant. So we want to grow our tomatoes, first of all, to separate the varieties by a little bit. Grow some flowers in between if you're growing more than one variety, because they can cross-pollinate. They often don't, to be honest, but it depends on the pollinators you have flying around in your garden and so on. So it is a possibility. So a little bit of separation between varieties is good. And if you can label them in your garden, then that's even better. If you know the name of the type you're growing and you really like it, put a little popsicle stick or a stake or something in the garden that identifies it. Or draw a little garden map so that you know this is what type is here, sort of thing. So the one that we're going to save seeds from today is called druzhba. And so I've harvested them into this basket, which is labeled. And then I've also got these ones on a plate, which I labeled as well. But druzhba, so tomatoes are from South America, actually, originally. So they're from Turtle Island. But then a lot of them got taken to Europe and bred. There was some more breeding work done there, and then some of them got brought back. So this is druzhba, which was taken to Russia, or bred in Russia. Now, when I say bred, it's nothing fancy. This is just gardeners saving seeds in their own gardens. Basically, it can be as simple as that. So what that means is that druzhba is adapted to a shorter season, and it has various characteristics that those gardeners liked and that happen to work quite well here in Canada as well. So it does tend to crack a little bit, but that's sort of normal. It's an heirloom variety, does that. And it also can have sort of the greenish shoulders, which is the area right around the top there. Sometimes it's a little bit greenish, but that actually is indicative of really nice flavor. It's something to do with the way tomatoes metabolize sugars. I can't explain it exactly, but green shoulders on a tomato actually usually indicates sweetness, which is kind of nice. So these are really nice, typical druzhba tomatoes. And the plants that they grew on, also typical druzhba tomatoes, like with the right kind of leaf and the right growth habit and all those kind of things. So we've picked these fruit. To pick tomatoes for seed, you want to pick them when they are ripe for eating. So you don't want to pick them when they're underripe, really. You kind of want to let them stay on the vine until they're ripe for eating. And then if you can let them sit overnight or even for a day, then a little bit of after ripening will happen, which just means that there will be more seeds in here that will actually finish up. They maybe weren't quite ripe when you picked it, but the severing the fruit from the stem sends a signal to hurry up. So you can take a tomato off a plant and cut it up and get the seeds out of it, but you'll get more ripe seeds if you can let it sit overnight. So just a little tip there. And what else do I need to say about harvesting these tomatoes? It's nice if you can get at least one fruit from each different plant that you've got growing, again, because of that genetic diversity piece. So this tomato, all the seeds in here will have the same mother plant, but they might have different fathers from that, your same variety, the same population of plants that you were growing together. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Because tomatoes can be somewhat insect pollinated, so it's possible that an insect can pick up some tomato pollen and take it to the next flower. But they are largely self-pollinating, which means that mostly the pollen, probably most of the seeds in here would have the same mother and father, which is okay. For tomato plants, it's fine. So there's a couple of different stages to saving seeds from tomatoes. Feel free to ask questions anytime, by the way. That's no problem. So for the first step, here's what you will need. You'll need a cutting board, a knife, a spoon is sort of optional. I find them handy. You'll need a mason jar, which I'm going to have to clean out, and some masking tape and a Sharpie marker. And that's it, and your ripe tomatoes, of course. So that's all you need for the first stage. So most people have this kind of thing around their house. The only thing that you might want to invest in is some cheesecloth. Not everybody has cheesecloth lying around these days. It used to be very common, but it's less so now. But this is really handy because you're going to actually let your tomato seeds ferment a little bit. And you want some air to be able to get into the jar to help that process, but you don't want fruit flies getting into your jar. So this is really helpful for that. The cheesecloth keeps the fruit flies out. Trust me, I have done this experiment myself. And it wasn't an experiment because I didn't do it purposely, but if you let fruit flies get into your jar, they will hatch out eggs, and there will be larvae in there, which are almost the same size and shape as a tomato seed. It's pretty impossible to separate them out from the tomato, except they're squirmy. So you really do want to try to avoid that. So you can put a lid on. I think in this handout actually, Seeds of Diversity does recommend that you just plain old put the lid on. So your regular mason jar lid. The problem with that, in my experience, is the airflow thing. Like when you open it up, then it's a bit stinkier. It's not as nice. With the cheesecloth, it seems to be more aerobic sort of fermentation, and it seems a bit more, I don't know, I find it more pleasant. But what you're going to do is label. So label, label, label. We're going to label this jar with the name Druzhba. And this may not be as key if you're only doing one type of tomato. If you only grew one type and that's all you're saving seed from, you may be able to remember that. But if you're ever doing more than one type, or you've done it 2 years in a row, or whatever, or if you're like me, you're probably likely to get mixed up. So labeling is very, very helpful and useful. And I'm going to put the year on here too, because I once left a jar of tomatoes fermenting in my closet for more than a year, and it was really useful to know what year that seed was from, because it still germinated. But I don't recommend you do that. I've made all the mistakes, that's why I get to be up here teaching. So right on the jar, we're going to put Druzhba. And then we're going to start cutting up our tomatoes and putting the seeds in. Now we are ready. So to cut them, it's best to cut them across the equator of the tomato. So if these are the poles, North Pole and South Pole, this is the equator, right? The reason for that is that the tomato seeds are all in sections inside, and this way you get a cross cut of all the sections, so it's easier to get them out. Already got some seed on the knife there. And then this is where I like to use the spoon. You don't necessarily have to use a spoon, but it gets a bit messy otherwise. So you can see we've got all of our sections are cut in half this way. And we're just going to squeeze, because we want the juice as well, and a little bit of pulp is fine. The fermentation will happen easier if we get a bit of juice in there. So we're just going to squeeze all sections. You can see more seeds come out every time you squeeze.
One of the things I always appreciate about the fruits and vegetables is how generous they are with their seeds.
Yes.
There are many, many seeds.
Yeah.
Followed by John Mayle and RJ Schneider.
Yeah, and as you'll see, most of these seeds will probably germinate, which means there's lots to share with your neighbors, because nobody needs this many tomato plants. This is just one fruit. This is just one half of one fruit so far. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty good. Got one on my finger. It's a good idea to clean your tools between each batch of tomatoes. So now we get to Curtis's favorite part. This can be made into ketchup. This can be made into salsa, tomato sauce, pizza sauce, whatever you like. As long as you do it right now, or soon, so before it starts to rot, right? You could definitely make this into whatever you like. There's a lot of tomato still there, right? A lot of the useful part of the tomato. So don't be afraid to do this as you're canning, as you're preparing your tomatoes. Get some seeds out. Oh, I missed one.
I know this year I used the glass measuring cup, had a wide mouth when I was doing because I was putting tomatoes, getting ready to do a big batch of tomatoes and stuff. And I just squeezed them into there, put them into the boiling water to release the skins off, and then did as I normally did.
Right. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, you don't want to cook the seeds. If the seeds get cooked by accident, they're not going to be any good. You can't add heat to them. But yeah, as long as you squeeze them out first, that's great. So I'm going to just finish up with this one.
We do have some of the Druzhba available today if you'd like to take a seed packet before you leave.
Yeah, isn't that great? That were grown right here, just down the road, within walking distance. Talk about the 100-mile diet, right? This is the 100-mile seed diet. Okay.
We should actually cut it up and then people can try it.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to cut some up for a tasting, absolutely. Does anybody feel like, would it be helpful if you actually came up here and cut a tomato and squeezed it? Like, is there anybody that's that kind of kinesthetic learner that needs to do that process right here and now? No, everybody's okay? Yeah. I'm always a bit leery about letting people use the knife, but there are people who need that to learn, so I respect that. All right, good. Yeah, so Jennifer, I can pass this over to you if you want, because this is the first part of the tomato seed saving done. Okay, we've got, we had 6 fruit here. Imagine we cut up all 6 fruit and squeeze them all into the jar. It's all labeled. We're going to put the cheesecloth and the ring on, just like that. And then we're going to put this aside somewhere room temperature, not in the sun, and where it's not going to get knocked over, and where you can find it again in about a week, ideally.
Have to be in a dark spot, like in a cupboard, or just not in the sun?
Nope, just not in direct sunlight. Yeah, nope. Anything else is fine. Yeah, that's it. So that is phase number 1. Now, what's that? So the
Like as soon as they had that scum on the top,
The only study I have seen done on this is that 4 days is ideal for some. 4 days removes seed-borne diseases. So that's what one of the reasons for doing this is because some tomato diseases can be carried on the seeds. And yeah, that's after, the studies show that after 4 days of fermentation, those seed-borne diseases are likely gone. So that's a good reason to do it. So I say a week, but it can be 4 days, it can be a week, it can be 2 weeks. Yeah, a year I don't recommend, but it can be a year. So, because you're just trying to get that pulpiness off the seeds, basically. Partly we're just sort of mimicking what a tomato would naturally do, right? This is kind of how a tomato would plant its seeds itself. It would drop the fruit, like the ripe fruit would drop to the ground. Maybe it would splat. And then the seeds, this all, like it would ferment, it would rot. So the tomato plant, the mother plant, has actually included some germination inhibitors on the seeds in that pulp, which stop the seeds from germinating right away. They only germinate after those inhibitors have rotted off. So that's sort of to keep the plant from, like, if those seeds germinated right away in the fall, when these are falling to the ground, then they wouldn't have a chance, right? There would still be some kind of winter, or even in South America, presumably there's a change of seasons that are less favorable or whatever. So the fact that the germination inhibitors have to be rotted off gives the seed a better chance of having a full season to grow. So it's quite clever, actually. Plants are pretty smart. So we're just sort of controlling that process for ourselves so that we can plant the seeds when we want to, basically. But this is the same process that a tomato seed would naturally go through, basically. Make sense? So, through the magic of time lapse, not exactly. I started these fermenting about a week ago. And this is what they will look like. Obviously this jar is a bit more full. I did the whole 6 fruit for this one. So now you see how much 6 fruit will almost fill a mason jar, more than half full anyway. And can everybody see okay? I can't really walk around. Sometimes I walk around and show people what's going on here, because it's kind of neat. You can see there's a layer of seeds on the bottom. So those are probably the good seeds, like the ones that got fertilized and they're nice and dense and full. And then there's a layer of sort of mostly water and some pulp and stuff like that. And then on the top there's another layer of that is pulp and some other what looks like seeds floating on there. But those seeds are probably not, they probably didn't get fertilized properly. They probably didn't get pollinated properly. So they're just actually seed coats. They're not really a whole seed. And that means they're light, so they float at the surface. So we're gonna pour all of those off. We're gonna get rid of them. So that's another advantage of doing the tomato seeds this way, is that you don't have to physically pick through and get rid of all the bad seeds, which would be a really time-consuming process. And then on the very top, there's a nice layer of mold. And you'll be able to see what type of mold you have in your house, because you haven't added anything, it's added itself. So it's come there from your house. But that's normal, everybody's house has it. It's all good. It's all good. So we're gonna open it up. And at this stage, we want to add some water. So you'll see some tomato seed saving instructions recommend that you add water during the first stage of tomato seed processing, but I think my theory is that that's in warmer climates where you want to slow down the fermentation a little bit, maybe dilute the sugars. But here where we have pretty cooler temperatures in the fall at this time of year, it seems to work very well. We get lots of fermentation in the 4 days without adding any water, just with the tomato juice. So I never add water at that first stage, but at this stage I certainly do. So this, the water that we have here is just tap water, but I don't think would it be chlorinated here?
It probably is because of the water treatment thing.
Yeah. So ideally you would let the water sit overnight again. Same like letting the tomatoes sit. So it does take a little bit of forethought, but letting the chlorine evaporate out is going to be easier on the seeds, basically. And the other nice thing about letting it sit is that then it's room temperature. So if you're using well water, for instance, it's often really, really cold, right? So that might shock the little seeds a little bit. So if you let it sit until it's room temperature, that's a good idea too. It only takes about an hour, I've been told, for the chlorine to evaporate out. And of course, by then it would be room temperature as well. So something to think about anyway. Of course, you know, water is very important. We all need water. Water is life, and we need it for this process too. So just to be mindful about the water that we're using is a good thing. So at this point, we're going to fill this whole jar with water so that the jar is full. And then we're going to stir it up. And what the stirring does is it's just sort of a physical agitation. So any pulp that may still be attached to those good seeds at the bottom gets a chance to be removed. It can just be agitated away. So, yeah, of course.
When I did 3 different kinds, and I looked at colors, so I did add water, because that's the way I have been doing it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time I don't do it this way. I just make a seed mat by dragging the seeds, the pollen seeds across the paper towel.
Right.
And then I let it dry.
Okay.
But they seem to germinate just as well.
Great.
Even though I know that's not the more professional way. But one thing I did notice, 2 of the jars, when they were separated and the seeds were wet, they looked like all the pulp was off. And it was. But on the other jar, which had the exact same amount of days and time, when I rinsed them, poured it out, a lot of the seeds went out of the jar. So
oh, wow.
Some of them were floating on that one. And then the ones that did rest, when I poured them out, they still had the pulp on them, which I thought was really strange, considering the other ones resulted in much like the same way.
Were they different varieties?
Yeah, they were all different varieties. Like I did 3 different varieties. So the one didn't release its pulp off of it. So I'm still drying them. Do you think they'll still be okay?
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, there is quite a bit of difference amongst tomato varieties. Like the paste tomatoes in particular tend to hold on to their pulp a lot more, and you'll get a lot less juice. You'll just get
Amish paste.
okay, yeah. They will not be as juicy. They'll be much more pulpy, and it's harder to and less seed. Yeah, less seed in general, and yeah. The paste tomatoes, sometimes companies, I have seen it where they'll charge more money for the paste tomatoes because it's harder to get the seeds and there's fewer of them. So yeah, there is some variation amongst tomatoes for that reason, yeah. Yeah, this one, I expect the drusba will probably clean up pretty fast, and I don't think we'll find much pulp on the seeds because it's, sort of what we call a slicing tomato, and it is really juicy, and it even tastes quite clear. Like if we do get a chance to taste it, I think you'll find it's quite a light, sort of clear taste to it. Unlike some of the tomatoes that taste quite meaty, right? That can be kind of dense and rich almost. So, yeah, but I think that's pretty normal, Janice, and you should still get seed. You can definitely just, as she says, spread seeds out to dry on a paper towel. It's just that then the paper towel kind of sticks to the seeds, so you'll end up planting some paper towel when you plant your seeds, which is, probably not a problem.
I sort of just bury the whole paper towel with soil.
Oh, yeah?
I don't even pick them off.
Okay, and then just let them all come up and then separate out the plants later. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so we've got our water added and we've stirred it up, and you can see a lot better now how there's quite a good layer of nice clean looking seeds on the bottom. Can everybody see that? And then there's a lot of liquid, and you can see the mold that's floating on the top. So we're gonna pour that right off. So this could be poured into your compost or outside. You may be able to get away with it pouring down your drain, but there will be chunks in it, so just use a strainer or something at first. But so we're going to pour it carefully, making sure not to pour the good seeds out. We're just going to pour what's off the top. Leave it at that, and we're going to add more water. So yeah, sometimes some types of tomato need you to do this process repeatedly, like 3 or 4 times maybe. We'll see how the drusbas behave. But I'm going to fill it up again. What's that?
They look like they're cleaning up.
They're cleaning up pretty fast, yeah.
And it is a very juicy tomato. If you didn't get to taste it.
Yeah, we'll cut some more up later. So we can definitely see the difference already. The water is clearer, and the seeds are quite visible at the bottom. These are nice, larger size seeds too. Most of the tomato seeds look just about the same, identical, but there is slight variations in size. So these are some of the bigger ones.
Does that make a difference when you plant them? Would the tomatoes themselves be bigger?
No. I'm not sure what determines that, but it doesn't. There, a bit more mold and stuff pulp off. I'm going to do it one more time just for good measure.
And you had that jar sitting how long? 4 days?
1 week. This one was sitting for 1 week. Yeah. 4 days is the minimum.
I'll have to note that. Mental note this down. At least a week. Because
I usually put it on my counter, and when I can smell it, like something.
Then you know.
Then I know it's like, what is that?
Oh yeah, I gotta do the tomatoes. So I forgot to give you a materials list before I started this second stage. We do, there's a couple of things that we do need. So I use these craft paper bags at this stage. partly because you can label them. You can write its name on it again. Or I'm actually going to take the label off the jar and stick it on here. And also because I don't find they stick as much as paper towels. A lot of people do complain about that. They'll try a paper towel and then they'll find that it sticks, and they don't like that. So the craft paper doesn't seem to stick as much. It does a little bit, but not as much. And other people will try spreading them out on a ceramic plate, or not plate. But the problem with that is that it's not absorptive. It doesn't absorb anything. So you're relying on the water to evaporate, and it just is going to take a bit more time. So I like these because they'll absorb a little bit of water as well. But that's basically that, and a sieve, a good strainer is what you need at this stage. So I'm going to pour this off again.
I bought a box of the natural coffee filters. They don't have any bleach or anything. They're brown.
Right.
Like the paper.
Yeah.
And I use them on top of like I guess like kind of a paper plate.
Mm-hmm.
But I have reused them for years and years and years.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Great.
Same ones.
Okay.
For drying seed, I just keep them.
Yeah.
Stacks. Once I'm done, I make sure they're good and clean, and I.
Yeah, no seeds on them, yeah.
Those coffee filters, however they're made, they also, the seeds come off them really easy.
Nice.
And because they're fibrous, the fibers do not attach to the seed.
Nice, okay.
I found they've worked good for everything, for watermelon seeds, like pumpkin squash,
Right.
tomato.
And can you write on them like with pencil, or write on the plate?
I write on the plate because the coffee filter, I just never tried writing on it.
Yeah, I'm thinking you'd have to use a Sharpie, and then you wouldn't be able to reuse it as much, or be,
I
yeah.
do it usually. I have the tape. I use the
Masking
baker's
tape?
the
Yeah.
green one.
Okay,
And then I just tear it off the jar and transfer it onto the plate. So
Yeah.
that it's all reusable.
sounds good, good. So can everybody hear that? Just, yeah, coffee filters with masking tape? Great.
Preferably the ones with no bleach.
No bleach, unbleached coffee filters. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to pour water in here one last time, but it's basically, I'm not going to stir it up or put it, at this point I'm going to put these right through the sieve. So it's just enough water to get them, and we're not going to let them settle because we know these are all good seeds. We've poured off all the unpollinated seeds now. So there we go, right through the sieve. And then, now this next step is a bit tricky. You'll get the hang of this. But it's basically, you want to flip the sieve over onto the paper bag without splattering seeds everywhere. So it's just a really quick flip of the wrist. And it's kind of hard to demonstrate, unfortunately. So move this out of the way for the camera. And yeah, so 1, 2, 3. There. So there we have our nice, neat pile of tomato seeds. And like I said, I'm going to take the masking tape right off of here, off the jar. And we'll wash the jar up and reuse it and stick it on here instead. Now, if you want to, you can spread them out a little bit. Of course, that will help them to dry faster, but you don't have to. They will dry just fine without. Yeah.
So that's 6 tomatoes.
6 tomatoes, 6 fruit. Yeah. And so then again, with this, you just want to set it aside somewhere to dry, somewhere that's safe, that it's not going to get eaten by mice or cooked accidentally, or yeah, basically they're just safe to dry at room temperature for a couple of weeks at least. It really, they'll be pretty dry after a couple of weeks. You're probably good to finish at that point by putting them into, you can put them right into this paper bag if you want, for one thing. That would be fine because it's labeled, and the paper is nice because it will breathe a little bit. But if you do have mice in your house, or if you have other pests that I'm not aware of, because they do exist, then you can put them in either in the paper bag inside a glass jar, or in a paper envelope. Like we've got these, they're called coin envelopes. You can get them at Staples. Those, the smaller sized envelopes fit inside a mason jar quite nicely. And you can label them, obviously. If you do put them in a mason jar, what we recommended at the Heirloom Seed Sanctuary always was to leave the ring of the jar a little bit loose, because they will breathe, actually. They do respire seeds, so they do need a little bit of airflow. So if you just leave the lid a little bit loose, that's a good idea. And there you have it. There's your tomato seeds for many years. I mean, how long would it take us to grow this many tomato seeds, right? So either you can share them with your community, share them with your friends and neighbors, or they will last. Tomato seeds, in my experience, will last up to 20 years. So you can keep them for a long time and just plant them year by year. I do recommend growing them out for seed more often than that, though, just in case you forget or if something something happens. So I do recommend saving seed from them, not once every 20 years, but more frequently than that, if you can. So, yeah. Thank you very much.
Help somebody out.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
You guarantee them to grow, right?
Pretty much, yeah. In my experience, they'll be 100%. Thanks.
Just had a seed saving demonstration on how to plant seeds.